Greetings and welcome to Real Talk with Joy. I am your host, Joy Mbong, and we're recording live from Atlanta, Georgia. Today's edition, we have on the show a prolific, philanthropic educator besides that, but he is a voice within the African and the African American community. My guest embodies what we seek to highlight within the African and American community: tenacity, efficiency, hard work, and relentless dedication with his decor. He is a remarkable politician and has made history in dynamic ways in both the United States and Nigeria precisely. He received his bachelor's degree in political science and journalism from the Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma in the year 1984. He also received his graduate and doctorate of law degree from the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida in the year 1987. While in Atlanta, Georgia, he's been involved in local civic and religious groups. He is a member of the American Trial Lawyers Association, American Inns of Court Foundation, Georgia Bar Association, and American Bar Association. With an overwhelming response from the Igbo community, he was elected president of the Igbo Union, Atlanta, USA. In this capacity, he united all the 32 organizations of Igbo origin in Atlanta. In his second year as the president of Igbo Union, he launched the first phase of $1.5 million Igbo Culture Center in Atlanta, Georgia. He and other Igbo leaders in America founded the World Igbo Congress, headquartered in Houston, Texas. The World Igbo Congress is the main political umbrella of all Igbo organizations in America and the rest of the world. He founded and became the president of the African American Lawyers Association in Atlanta, Georgia, USA, precisely in 1999. He was the chairman, Board of Directors, African Executive Leadership Council, based in Washington, D.C. And this is a non-for-profit organization comprising of 18 African ambassadors to the United States and Africa, and African American business leaders. Also, he has been a director and spokesman for ANIC, the American Nigerian International Chamber of Commerce. Presently, he is the principal of the law office of Onyirimba and Associates, PC, based in Atlanta, Georgia, the president of Onyirimba Communications Incorporated here in Atlanta, Georgia, and also the publisher of the African Quest magazine, and the host of the African Quest television show based in Atlanta, Georgia. He serves on the board of many organizations such as the African Trade Center, the American Nigerian International Chamber of Commerce, the African Chamber of Commerce, and the Boreholes for Africa and NICOR. Presently, he's running for the Imo State Senatorial seat, precisely Okigwe zone, and is under the party APGA, All People's Alliance Party. Present before you Attorney Charles Chibuike Onyirimba, JD. Attorney Charles, thank you so very much for making it on our show today.
Thank you very
on Real
much.
Talk with Joy. We're really truly appreciative of your presence here with us. And let's just go further into the show, because I know the audience, they're all excited to want to know more about you and what you're about, and also you're aspiring to run for the electoral seat for Imo State Senatorial District, precisely Okigwe zone.
That's
now,
correct.
if you would be kind enough to just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do enjoy doing your spare time when you're not really out there assisting the people of Nigerian, precisely the Igbo community? What do you enjoy doing best?
My pastime is reading, listening to gospel music,
Awesome.
and some reggae music.
Okay, you got a little flavor there.
A little flavor there. But mostly my pastime I spend listening to gospel music
Awesome.
and writing poetry.
Oh, you're a poet.
So those are the two things that occupy me when I'm not involved in community service or law practice or serving in every capacity that I find myself in. It is quite enriching when you spend time by yourself and reflect on the qualities and services that can be rendered to improve humanity. And that's what occupies me. So when I'm writing, I am writing based on what things ought to be and how I see things should be. And those are reflected in things that I write.
Okay.
So,
thank you so much for that response. Now, based on the accolades, based on all the different positive remarks that we're hearing from the community about your aspirations and also what the track record of based on what you've done, why are you so passionate about community service, especially to the Nigerian, African, and even beyond it, American community?
well, when I came to the United States in 1981, I came because when I finished high school, I was involved in what is called the Youths Against Corruption movement. I was a newspaper reporter writing as a columnist, fighting the ills of the then Nigerian government. I was young, I was 17, and yet I was writing as if I was a high college graduate.
Awesome.
The things I was writing was quite deep. And because the depth was much, a lot of threatening letters were written to my dad in those days about this son of his who's writing about this investigative reporting that I was doing.
Very bold.
So I left Nigeria in 1981 as an attempt to, one, live to equip myself with higher degree, two, to escape the possible repercussions of the actions that I was doing as at that time. So in 1981, I came to the U.S. Now, when I came to the U.S., I went to a small town called Springville, Maine. It was an all-white school. 99% white. There was probably just 1 out of 3 black students there. I was loved by many. All the white boys and girls were all in love with me. And they showed me love. But because I was a student of history back home, I understood quite well that discrimination exists in America.
Third.
And yet I could not see the discrimination. So I told one of my host families, please tell me the place where I can find discrimination. The essence of my American education will be incomplete if I don't experience discrimination. They said, no, son, don't go to Oklahoma. Don't go to Georgia. Don't go to Alabama or Mississippi. These are very bad places. So immediately they said that, I went to the library and looked for schools in these areas.
And that's where you applied.
That's how I ended up in Oklahoma, just to go and find discrimination. Did I find discrimination? When I got to Oklahoma, I was the first black person to run for student government, just in my second year at that school. And did I find discrimination? I did find discrimination, but it was not in the degree that I expected it, simply because I refused to see it. What you see and what you perceive is what you feel. But because I don't perceive it, even though it may be happening around me, I failed to see it.
Wow.
So eventually I ended up University of Florida Law School. When I finished law school, was during the time Babangida was the president of Nigeria, the head of state of Nigeria. There were toxic waste that were brought into Nigeria to pollute the country. These things were shipped from all over, from Europe. Crates and crates of loads and loads of containers going to Nigeria, all toxic waste.
Just as a dumping ground.
And they were bringing it to Nigeria to dump. Immediately, I organized a lot of Nigerians, over 70,000 signatures were gotten from Nigerians, Americans, Africans, everywhere. And I sent these signatures to the government then as an attempt to forestall this dumping that they were doing in Nigeria. And I also submitted documents on how to prosecute toxic waste because I was working at Department of Environmental Regulation. I knew the process, the issues, because at that time Nigeria had no particular laws on dealing with toxic waste because it was not part of our books. So community service has been part of my life since I was 17.
That's beautiful.
And continued to do that when I moved to Atlanta, Georgia.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you so very much for that response. Now, at this point, I mean, the audience and everyone is really eager to know, why have you decided at this period of time to run for the office of Senator seat in Edo State? Okigwe zone?
Thank you very much for that question. Running for the Senate in Nigeria is a necessity that has to be done.
Okay.
As the former president of the Imo State citizens in the U.S., I had the opportunity to experience firsthand the things that are happening in my state, Imo State, but also as a founder, one of the founders of the Nigerian Diaspora Organization, the Nigerian People's Forum. These are all organizations that are all based, Nigerian-based. By the way, in 1996, I was the chairman of the Nigerian Olympic Committee here in Atlanta, Georgia. So I have been involved in tremendous level in the entire Nigerian affairs and African affairs as a whole. For 3 years, I was the honorary consul here in Atlanta, issued all documentations relative to a consular service.
Yes.
Through that effort, I mingled, I understood, I lived the Nigerian problems overseas. Many of us in the diaspora don't have quite a say in Nigeria. The issues that affect my people are issues that those of us that live outside the system are able to see how things are working in the U.S. It is our duty to therefore utilize those knowledge that we have acquired here to help improve the lives of our people back home. Any education that is acquired that is not applied is a wasted education.
Very true.
Those of us that have acquired this knowledge, instead of using the knowledge to impact on some changes back home, if we decide to live in the comfort of America, then the calling on our lives may not be achieved. We owe to ourselves and we owe to our continent and our country. They need to go back at some stage to participate in the nation building. Nation building cannot be left only to those that are in the system. You know, when you're in a system, you're used to that system. It's difficult for you to make a change because you know no better. So corruption thrives because in corrupt system, everybody works, benefits in that corrupt system. Yeah. It's part of their makeup. It has to take people from outside who see differently to come and say, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is wrong. This is unacceptable. Okay. So we live in a society that has been pervaded by corruption. Corruption from top to bottom. Okay. And to correct those corrupt practices, it takes you, I, the diasporans to return. Okay. And in returning, we must equip ourselves with adequate knowledge of the goings on in the system. You can only do that if you're inside the system. Outside the system,
it's absolutely
it's impossible.
Now, thank you very much for that response. Now, if you would, looking back in history, precisely with either Nigerian presidents or other African presidents or world leaders, who would you say really provides inspiration to you and why?
In the Nigerian context, in the past 30 years of Nigerian political history, we have gone down from what Nigeria used to be. Instead of improving, we are really going down. I know when 30 years, 35 years ago, before I come to the US, there was light, there was water, there are basic amenities that can make life much better. Today, we have no lights, we have no water, most of the roads are terrible, yet the economy the population has grown and grown and grown. We have more productivity in the oil sector. The wealth of the nation is much, much more than it was 30 years ago. Yet, we have retrogressed. It is important, therefore, that in addressing the issues of socio-economic recovery of the nation, people like us come home, participate in the dialogue. And in participating, we have to look outside the country, who amongst all former presidents have done well. You know, we lived in most of our time in military government.
Okay.
So military government is not a democratic government, it's autocratic government. They do as they want. I really cannot stand here and say this is a former president of Nigeria, that I can say yes, in all ramifications and all degrees of it, they did well. Apart from the historical time when Okigwe was president, Tafawa Balewa was prime minister, these are historical facts of past 50 years ago. But in our recent history, what have we done? How have the presidents done? Has the economy improved? Has the corruption been reduced? Has the quality of life of average Nigerian improved? The answer is no. The answer is no. So there must be a new paradigm shift. There must be a shift towards a nationhood where the entire Nigerians see themselves as Nigerians, not just as an Igbo man, as a Hausa man, a Yoruba man, an Efik man, or any other tribes. We are in a tribal-based system that it makes it difficult for even whoever comes out as a president to effectively institute whatever programs he wants to do instead of being done on his own sectional basis. What does that mean? It means those of us also who are outside the system that live here. In the US, I am not just an Igbo man. I am a total Nigerian. I have no discrimination whether Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, whatever group you are. This is how we ought to see ourselves. Okay. See Nigeria first. And the Nigeria first concept, then development can come about.
Thank you very much for that response. Now, in reference to healthcare, if you would, how do we mend the broken system of healthcare in Nigeria and also create equal access to the women and children, precisely?
The healthcare issue is one of the major issues why I'm running for Senate in my zone. It is unfortunate that when urgent care, there's no provision for urgent care. For sure. If an accident happens now when somebody's at home, it is difficult to find a place to go. Those who travel home find it difficult to even go to any particular hospital because, one, there are no proper infrastructural basis for these hospitals, no equipment. There are buildings, no equipment. And there are so many doctors everywhere looking for where to go, but there are no equipment. So healthcare delivery in Nigeria is at its lowest ebb. Our politicians, all of them, have the ability to go overseas. For little thing as malaria, they fly to London to go treat it. For little ailments that they can do at home, they fly overseas to go do them. So they do medical tourism to India every day, to London, to Germany, to now to Saudi Arabia, everywhere. Yet there is none provided at home. Why I'm running for office is I want to institute a law that must be health care delivery. It must be a right of every Nigerian to receive adequate health care. Be it health care insurance and provision that in every state budget, health care ought to be number one. And right now it is not. It's on the bottom of every state's appropriation bills. And that's not right.
That's very true. It's absolutely, because the healthcare systems were declining. That's declined for the past years. And it's also based on infrastructure because you cannot really run an adequate structured healthcare facility without adequate water and also electricity. That's just really not obsolete.
There's more generators in one locality than you can see in the whole of state of Georgia.
Yeah, I know.
Every house has a generator, every apartment has their own generator, and the pollution that comes from the generators is unbearable. You can sleep at night because every house has its own generators and the noise level is extraordinary. How can you sleep? It's impossible. Yeah, and the cost of running these generators is astronomical. So you must fuel them and fuel them and fuel them. It is really a total wastage that is going on in our country.
Yes, that's absolute. But I guess those in the economy, they're trying their best to see some improvement one way or the other. That's why we need more, legislators or politicians like you to come back to Nigeria or even Africa per se, based on your jurisdiction to implement those changes for the people.
And once those changes are implemented in one locality, the another system, another locality will copy it. We just want changes to begin at one point.
Yes.
Progressive change. If it begins, say, in my Okigwe zone, Imo North, the other sides, the other zones would say, by the way, look at what's happening in Okigwe zone.
Let's adopt that.
Let's begin to copy what is going on. And those changes must happen.
Great. That's awesome. Now, in reference to the foreign reserve based in Nigeria, how do you suggest that we can increase those, the foreign reserve base in Nigeria per se? Just suggestions.
Well, the increasing the foreign reserve is when Nigerians begin to export our own products. Can you imagine we produce all the palm oil and all the oil we produce, even all the crude oil that is produced in Nigeria, we do not refine any of them. Because we don't refine, our foreign reserve is depleted because we send out our product and have them refined overseas, then we have to buy it back to come back into the country. We must, one, begin to establish new refineries in the country so that we can now export. When our exportation base increases, our foreign reserve also increases. And that affects the value of our dollar, the value of the Nigerian naira. Now we're having 360 naira to $1. When I came to America, it was $2 to 1 naira.
Very strong then.
Naira was $2 to 1 naira. Now is $1
to 360. It's really,
it is a shame.
Sad, yeah. Now, in reference, and thank you so very much for that response, sir, if you would. Now, in reference to the educational system, we're all aware that there is a strong decline in the educational system. Now, what resources would you suggest that could be put in place to reverse such issues? And then do you also believe that e-learning could be a factor that can, probably reverse, or solve the educational crisis in Nigeria? What is your take on that?
The educational crisis in Nigeria, to a large degree, is owing to the strikes. The strikes every month, every other, there are strikes between the school teachers or the students. Because of all these strikes, some people who start school, they're supposed to be 4 years, end up being in school for 6 years, 7 years, or strikes, or more in some instances. Medical doctors who begin school, they're supposed to finish in 6 years, 7 years, end up staying in school for 10 years. Because the teachers are on strike. Why are they on strike? One, the federal government or the state government are not paying their teachers' salaries. Because they are not paid well, they have to go on strike. Schools are not provided adequate infrastructures, and school students begin to riot. And when students riot, because of what they need that should be provided to them, now the school causes a strike because students are demonstrating for what validly should be part of their own. So the education system is so terribly low because of government actions. That's why a lot of people go into private schools, which are very expensive.
Very true.
But what can be done? Government owes a larger duty to make sure that teachers are paid well, the infrastructures are provided, student attention and student needs are taken care of. If these things are done, students will remain in school and quality of education will improve. Otherwise, we'll continue to go down.
Well, that's really, that's a challenge that a lot of a lot of students do face, so they have no choice than to opt for foreign education, traveling abroad, and also the fear of security, in order for those that are abroad wanting to come back home to either practice, based on their discipline, it's still there because they feel as though the economy is not fixed.
The second part of your question is on e-education.
Exactly.
The e-education part is only a few. Just quite a few will be able to, not that many people have laptops. So how can e-education function well where less than 2% of the students have laptops? Those of them that are studying computer science have never seen a computer before or don't have a laptop to compute, yet they are computer students. All they know is the theoretical, this is what a computer looks like, and this is where the keyboards are. How can you do e-education where the students don't have laptops, where there's no lights? Even if they have the laptops, there are no lights, there are no infrastructures to make these things work. So it's only limited to those of them that are in cities like Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, very few cities. So e-education, yes, is encouraging, but we're still very far away from that because the basic infrastructural needs that makes that work has not been put in place yet.
Thank you so very much for that response. Now, since you're based in Atlanta, Georgia, a few years back, the Nigerian-American Business Summit was held here in Atlanta, Georgia, and which precisely the theme had to do with housing and infrastructural development. Now, since you're running for a state senatorial seat, how do you think you can play a key role, in bringing the change towards the innovative changes for the people of your state? Based on the knowledge that you adopted from here, going back home to apply that knowledge to the Imo State?
Well, housing is the great need of the people. It's unfortunate that at this time in our political history, you'll still see people living in thatch houses, see people in houses that have no running water, no houses without modern facilities like the water system. There's still people living, utilizing pit holes for toilets and unsanitary environment.
Very true.
When I get to the Senate, it will become a necessity that I help institute or introduce bills that makes it a law that housing is a prime responsibility. It's a need, the greatest need of people. And with my network of friends and connections here, there are ways that buildings, houses, 2-bedroom houses, 3-bedroom houses can be built very cheaply. There are modern new structures that are in place that people can come and set up brand new homes with all adequate facilities. The problem then becomes also the electricity. So the government must come in with PPA where we have private-public partnerships to come. Government will do its own part and the private sector will do its own part because everything is not government. Everything is not government. The private sector must come in and help government build these structures. But to make that work, government must be responsive to the needs of the people and must provide an enabling environment for investors to come in and participate, just like the security issue you just mentioned.
Exactly.
With the absence of adequate security, investors will not come in. And if the investors come in and there are no facilities or infrastructure available for them to make these buildings sustain itself, then it cannot work. So we must have a synergy between the private sector and the government. Right. And the private sector looks up to the government. They want the government to be responsive. They want a government that is functional. If the government is functional, Nigeria will be the best place on the planet because the place is beautiful. Africa as a whole will have the tremendous resources.
Thank you so very much, Attorney Charles Onyirimba, for that response. Now, in reference to the Nigerian policymakers, how does one empower them to withdraw non-performing representatives still sitting in the system?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a very important question and a lot of ignorance amongst the electorate. They still don't know their rights. They think when people are elected, they become gods and demigods. They become masters and lords over the people without knowing that the power rests with the people. You know, the problem with Nigeria is a land, a country with so many laws, but we're a country governed by men, not by laws. And by that I mean there's respect to individuals much more than respect for the law. And because individuals are respected mostly under than the law, it becomes difficult for the law to take precedence over men. By men, I mean people in authority. So when people in authority, they begin to lord themselves over. Those of them in the Senate, out of all members of the Nigerian legislators, less than 15% adequately participate in the deliberations in the House. Deliberations of the Nigerian Senate, when you look at the statistics of those that have been contributing, less than 35% in the Senate, less than 25% in the House of Representatives. Then you come down to the state assemblies, it's worse. Less than 10% of members of the state assemblies are adequately involved in legislation, passing bills or introducing proper motions. How can they introduce the motions? They don't know what to do.
They've just been there for years.
They're just there, collect their salaries and collect all their commissions and contracts. So what we have is contract legislators. What does that mean? It means legislators that are there simply to find where contracts are and go do them. They will not sit. When you watch the Nigerian Senate on TV and you count the number of senators on the floor, you will see it's less than 35%. Where are the rest of them? How are the laws being made? Who is making the laws? So we owe ourselves a duty as Nigerians to hold our elected officials accountable. We must take a census of number of them that are participating in the deliberations of their various cities. And what are they doing in the Senate? That is why I am going to the Senate, to be sure that we hold them accountable and that we become responsive to the citizenry, not to ourselves.
Very true.
It's the citizenry, it's the ultimate power rests with the people. But in our system, once you're elected, you become lord, you become masters of the people, instead of still a servant of the people.
Very true.
Our people need to be educated.
So
That is their duty.
Okay, great. And so you strongly believe in servant leadership?
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you also feel as though Nigeria is ready for a new change, transformation?
Coming from home and in my campaign, there is a yearning for a new paradigm shift. There's a yearning for a change where the elected sees themselves as a servant of the people, not the lord of the people. You go to states where governors wake up overnight and decide what they want to do, and nobody has a say about it. We live in a country where a governor can come up to your zone and say, I've donated 10 million. This is the people's money. How can you donate people's money to them? And most of the donations are not appropriated in the appropriation bills of the House of Assembly. So where are these monies coming from? So we have a system where the governor of a state is the ultimate owner of the money or resources of the state, from the presidency down. And the mindset of the average Nigerian man has to change, that this power, this money does not belong to these individuals. It belongs to the people. And we must be able to question how these funds are being utilized, because they're not being utilized for the development of the state. They're not being utilized for the development of the localities.
Very true.
In many states, no local government elections. So we are running local government, even though the Constitution provides there must be chairman of the local assemblies, of the local governments. There must be senators, there will be president, there will be governors. Yet, all these things are not done. Wow. How can we function? How can a country grow in this?
Yeah, there certainly has to be strong change, strong transformation. And also, of course, in reference to what you said, the mindset of the people also has to be prepared. It has to change, and they have to have a stronger yearning to see positive changes and impacting the
Because for a lot of Nigerians' political history, we have been under military rule. The mind of the average Nigerian man is still militaristically centered. Power is in the hands of the military head of state or the military governor or military president. So we have an autocratic system where all power goes to Papa up, and that Papa is the governor or the president. We have not changed our mindset, knowing that we elected these individuals. So the Nigerian democracy as practiced is not yet democracy. We are practicing a quasi-military democracy. Wow. So it's not democracy, it's a new word. It's a Nigerian-cracy. That Nigerian-cracy means a formation, an amalgamation of partly democracy and fully military rule, where the president or the state governor is the ultimate. That's why they put in their appellations executive governor. There is nothing executive of the governor. He's a governor. Executive president. He is the president.
Okay. All right. No, I do. I mean, I can feel your pain, and also what you're saying is really absolute. That's how most of, how it's being seen in reference to what's going on over in Nigeria, the government and everything else. But now, coming down to the issue about the agitation of various, groups, what is the leadership really doing about it? Because it's causing a lot of trauma to the people, and it's a sad event.
The agitation for
various
groups is a yearning for restructure. Nigerians are yearning for a restructure the economy, restructure the political system, restructure the equations, how Nigeria assets are divided and subdivided. So this yearning for secession or yearning for separation is all as a result of the various ills of the country that is originating from its structure. When a building is faulty and is collapsing one side, you must prop it up. You must restructure that building for it to stand. For Nigeria to stand into the test of tomorrow, into a greater Nigeria, it must be restructured. And this restructure is what the entire National Assembly has called on it. The leaders of Nigeria have called on it. So we are calling on the president to accept the restructure rules that have been prescribed or been presented. Even now, the National Assembly is also asking that these restructure proposals that have been presented be implemented. Once that implemented, the regional bases, all the countries now have authorities In Nigeria, we have everything centered in Abuja. If you want to incorporate a company 400 miles away, you have to go to Abuja. Anything you do, you have to go to Abuja. To get a promotion for teachers, you have to go to Abuja for interview. So why must power be centered only at the center? There must be a restructure of so many facets of Nigerian life for the country to be able to survive. So we're asking that the government look into the restructure that have been called, and that's the basis of all the yearnings for separation from this group or that group or that group.
Okay, now we have a stronger understanding of agitation coming from various cultural groups, precisely. Now, this in reference to the Nigerians in diaspora. Now, why is it that most of the Nigerians in diaspora, be it whatever country, whether the United States or UK or just wherever they are located, why are they unable to cast their vote for their chosen delegates? And how can this issue be resolved? This is really going to be my last question.
It is a very important question. The Nigerian in Diaspora Organization have been moving, asking for the diaspora voting rights. It's been introduced in the National Assembly to give Nigerians in the diaspora authority and power to vote. But there are so many things involved in diaspora voting rights. One goes back to the corruption that we talk about in Nigeria. There is no strong faith in the people that when these elections are conducted, people vote overseas, that the result of what they voted will be adequately transmitted to Nigeria. There are corruptions in the electoral process at home. When people are sitting physically there and yet the votes are taken away from them, what less the one they are doing all the way in London or all the way in New York or Atlanta. So if the votes at home cannot be adequately counted for, who will account for those coming from
the diaspora?
Diaspora. So one, the issue of the electoral process being fair and clear. Two, the issue of the responsibility of handling these things overseas. Yes, there is a yearning for us to do that. We're advocating for a diaspora voting right. Even most importantly, for Nigerians in diaspora to be able to register. The key thing for you to vote, you have to register. All of us here cannot register because there is no appropriate avenue for those who cannot travel home to go to the embassies or the consulates and register. When we begin with adequate registration for Nigerians in diaspora, then that will lead to a second phase of the ability to vote. You cannot vote if you're not registered.
Very true. Very true. And thank you so very much, Attorney Charles Onyirimba. That's an important question that a lot of diasporans are yearning to see a difference, to see a change, that they're able to cast their own votes and affect change back home. And we do appreciate the fact that, fellow gentlemen like you and then other diasporans are also willing to go back home to contest for some electoral seats. And so for now, right now, since we're wrapping up, what do you really have to say as your final remark to the Nigerians in diaspora, the Imo State, the citizens of Imo State, and also what is their hope? What's your final remark at this point?
I would like to take this moment to say thank you very much, Joy, for bringing me on this show. It's really been quite exciting to share a few of things about Nigeria and about Imo State and my election into the Imo North, which is called Okigwe Zone, Senatorial Zone. I'm asking my fellow diasporans to get involved. You must get involved. There has been fear amongst our people that why would you go to run? They will kill you. They will do this. It is not that. You have to participate. We cannot leave it. When good men keep silent, bad men continue to rule. When we keep quiet and say they will kill, somebody will eventually die someday. But who will do it? We must do something. We must get involved. We must participate in the discourse. The Nigerian issue is not just our issue. It is for our children, our grandchildren. We cannot, if we're afraid to go home, where else can we come home? Our brothers and sisters in the Americas want to find a place they can call home. And we have a home, and yet we're running from our home. Where would we want the black Americans to go?
Very true.
If they are dreaming of going home one day, and those of us that know our home don't want to go back, what is the fate of the average black person then? We owe ourselves a duty, we owe posterity duty, we owe history duty to partake in this journey, be it a missionary journey to help change that nation. Your American education or your British education has no value if you cannot impact it upon your people to make a change. And I am willing, I am prepared to use that which I have learned in the system to help grow Nigeria, grow our judicial system. Our judicial system is the last hope of the common man. We must make the judicial system functional. And in doing so, there'll be hope.
Thank you so very much, Attorney Charles Onyirimba, for that response. We believe strongly in your vision and what you're trying to do for the citizens beyond Imo State, for Nigeria, even based on your attributes to those within here in the diaspora in the United States. And we believe strongly that the sky is your limit. And we really appreciate you for taking out your time to be on the show, Real Talk with Joy. And we've been talking to the renowned Attorney Charles Onyirimba, based here in Atlanta, Georgia, JD. And if you would, the best way to contact him, the information is on the screen, cconyirimba@yahoo.com. And if you have any questions or concerns about him, you could go ahead and forward those questions, which you would get a turnaround time response in an absolute adequate manner. And, go out, vote, cast your vote for those watching, be passionate about change in Nigeria, in your home. Change has to come from you. And we have our representatives that is going out there to be the forefront of change. And we wish you the very best of luck in this running of election. And we're looking for an exciting news and exciting response. I'm positive that it's going to turn out absolutely beautiful. So here again is a final note. Thank you so very much for joining us once again. I am your host, Joy Mbong, recording live from Atlanta, Georgia. It's Real Talk with Joy. We're talking about real people with real issues and real response. Till next time, God bless you and see you next time.